The problem with most e-commerce brands is they don't have a campaign strategy, but instead they just have a sending habit. They send because there's a sale, they send because revenue is dipped, or they send because the calendar just says it's Monday. And then they're left wondering why email marketing revenue is plateauing. You see, the thing is, top D2C brands don't think in campaigns, they think in buyer states, value tiers, and engagement intent. And when you combine these three things correctly, campaigns stop being just another email that you send out, they start being revenue generating engines. In this video, I'm going to break down the exact system we use at Retention for Brands to turn campaign strategy into a structured revenue portfolio. So let's get into it. Okay, so if you're new to the channel or you're wondering why the hell you should be listening to me, my name is Adam. I'm the co-founder of Retention for Brands, and we are a retention marketing agency responsible for over $100 million in email and SMS marketing revenue for some of the top DTC brands in the world. Here's a few images of me meeting some clients as well out in Las Vegas last year. So yeah, let's kind of dive straight into things. So the first section we're going to cover is segmenting your list for maximum volume and impact. So you might be wondering, okay, that's all well and good, sending more emails, but how do we actually do that without harming the list and making sure that we're tapping into every single pocket of the audience that we can? The first principle I kind of want to get across here is treating the core system as campaigns as a revenue portfolio. At an elite level, campaigns are not individual emails, they are capital allocation decisions. In order to kind of embody that system, we need to understand the different layers of segmentation. And layer one is buyer state segmentation. So this essentially relates to anyone, to who they are actually in the life cycle. So this layer answers intent, not demographics, not interest, just purely intent. So those core segments are going to basically include non-buyers with recent engagement. So these people obviously are, they're thinking about making a decision to place an order. They may have some objections. And it's our job to kind of overcome those objections through campaigns. We of course have first-time buyers. So if you're selling something like a subscription model, or else, if you're selling anything, what you're wanting to do here is, prime them for the next order, or at least if you're selling a subscription, prime them for that subscription order. Same goes for repeat buyers as well. You want them to come back again. You have your high frequency buyers. What I do want to say about the high frequency buyers is not to just adjust the amount of orders and the amount of days depending on your buying cycle. So for example, this might look way different if you're selling things like furniture, because you're not going to be coming back buying furniture every single month unless you're, buying a new house or something like that, or else you're a bit crazy. But anyway, the next one we have is lapsed buyers and win back opportunities. So note again, the adjustment needs to be made in terms of the amount of days here, depending on your buying cycle, because again, if you're buying something like a mattress, you're probably not going to come back in 6 months straight away. You might come back in a few years' time. So do bear that in mind. Now, let me move my head here. So the mistake that most brands make is they treat these as labels and not necessarily as decision filters. So each buyer state has different objections. So for example, a first-time buyer might have a different objection or different concerns as opposed to someone who's never bought before. And same for win-back opportunities. They've purchased a product before, they just haven't come back in quite some time. So maybe that was something about the product experience that they had. Maybe they didn't see the results. Maybe there was something wrong that we just kind of need to overcome. Of course, different tolerance for frequency as well. So basically your job is to ask yourself, does it really make sense to blast all of your emails to the same engaged segment over and over? Does that really make sense in this case? And obviously the answer is no, by the way. So now we're on to layer two, which is value tier segmentation. And you need to kind of ask yourself, who is actually funding your growth? Revenue is definitely not evenly distributed in your list, and campaign strategy should not be either. Every list should be tiered by actual customer value and definitely not guesswork. So typical tiers would kind of look something like this. You have your top value cohort. So this could be roughly 10 to 20%, the top 10 to 20% by lifetime value, your mid-value majority, and then your low-value or one-off buyers. Fortunately, for a lot of e-commerce brands, if you go into your Klaviyo account or whatever you're using, Omnisend, and you filter by, you make a segment for non-buyers, it's going to scare you how many non-buyers are sitting on your list, who you could be paying for on your Klaviyo bill, and are not being targeted specifically with campaigns trying to overcome those objections. Unfortunately, what most brands do is they will aggregate a bunch of segments in together. They will just send the same emails to the same people without taking into consideration the fact that a non-buyer is going to need different content to someone who's purchased before. And that's a very simple example. And of course, you can get a little bit more granular with this, a very basic example of what you can do here. So this layer exists to answer the simple question, if this person buys again, how much does it matter? And here's what elite brands do and what we do for our clients. So what we want to do is protect high value cohorts from over discounting. We want to give them early access, but not bigger offers, because we know that they've come back, multiple times. And we want to design campaigns that preserve margin, not just volume. Most brands unknowingly burn their best customers with the same blunt campaigns they send to everybody else. So as you can imagine, if you've purchased, 4 or 5 times from a brand, it would be kind of nice to get specific emails, at least acknowledging where you kind of sit in terms of value to that brand. And then layer 3, we have engagement segments. So who is actually receptive right now? And the core buckets, of course, include highly engaged, moderately engaged, at risk, inactive. And I think like 90-something% of e-commerce brands just blast their engaged list all of the time and fail to really look under the hood and see, okay, who in these engaged segments is a non-buyer, who has maybe bought once but hasn't come back in quite some time, who has bought once or who has bought twice, and so on. Of course, different kind of messaging for those different, different purchase behavior. And campaign performance can collapse when brands send revenue-driven messages to audience that are not receptive, which kind of goes without saying. And elite programs treat engagement state as a throttle. So highly engaged segments can receive urgency, moderately engaged need relevance, at-risk need warming before selling, and then inactive should be probably cleaned from the list, to be honest, given the fact that Klaviyo, a good few months back, maybe a year ago, changed their billing. So you're now billed for active profiles. So definitely would probably want to get rid of these people. Of course, if you have a sunset flow, you probably have at least attempted to re-engage those people. If they just haven't re-engaged, just get rid of them. And of course, this is how deliverability is protected without sacrificing any revenue as well. So now you might be wondering, okay, what was all that gibberish about? We'll kind of dive into how all of these layers work together. And the truth is, after working with 150 e-commerce brands, I have realized one thing to be true, that the brands who send the most volume see the best results. I haven't really seen the opposite of that. For brands who are doing really, really well. So that is like one core learning that I've had, especially after the last Q4 that we just went through with our clients. I've definitely seen that the brands who are sending big volume are winning here. So here's a quick example. We'll dive into a little bit of maths for the people who like to break things down a bit logically. So take a brand that sends 270 campaigns per year. That would be considered a pretty decent volume for, by most people's standards. But the thing is, this brand has left 95 days, sending days empty. So if you think about it, 365 days in the year, you only send 270 of those days, you're leaving 95 sending days empty. So of course we have 365 minus 270. Assuming this brand has an average campaign revenue of $5,000, this is $475,000 in revenue left sitting there. And that's just using back of the napkin maths. It's pretty simple, but it could be higher, could be a little bit lower, but it's still a substantial amount of revenue. The way in which these 3 layers work together is that it allows you to send a massive volume without oversending to the same customer. And this is something that I say to a lot of our clients, and has been working exceptionally well. And I think gone are the days of just sending 3 campaigns to an engaged segment every single week. You may have some people who might argue for that essentially, but in my experience working with again 7 to 9 figure brands, plenty of them, some of the top DTC brands in the world, this is what we're seeing work really, really well right now. And the funny thing is, customers do expect an element of personalization, moving forward. Like that's kind of what they expect. If you think about it, and I actually will have a video coming out about Netflix pretty soon and how there's a lot of learnings from that the e-commerce brands can take from how Netflix have run their subscription model. There isn't obscene amount of personalization that Netflix do on their platform. And I think because so many different products and services, even outside of e-commerce, are offering elite levels of personalization, it's almost nearly expected as a consumer. Now, I don't mean that personalization is going to absolutely, save your business, but it will definitely help in terms of your campaign strategy. It will help you to send high volume. And to be honest with you, the agencies and the brands who are saying that they don't want to send a high volume just simply don't have the operational capacity to do so. But I'm telling you, this is what the top DTC brands are doing, at least for our clients anyway. So if you can imagine a simple campaign calendar, for the week below, so we'll kind of go through this. It allows you to send every single week, whereby non-buyers will receive 3 emails per week. And again, this is a very simple example. You can kind of play around with this whatever way you want. So we have 2 non-buyer emails and 1 engaged email, because obviously non-buyers are going to be engaged as well, provided that you're making sure that you're reaching out to engage people. 1x buyers will receive 2 emails a week, repeat buyers will receive 4 emails a week, and then lapsed customers will receive 5 emails per week. So you can see here how we'll break it down. So we have 1x buyers, we have non-buyers, we have repeat buyers, 1x buyers, lapsed customers, engaged non-buyers. Now you will see that, of course, non-buyers will be a subset of engaged, because if you're a non-buyer, you probably might be engaged as well. So you'll get 2 emails here. So just bear that in mind when you're kind of running through this and you're kind of wondering, okay, how the hell, our lapsed customers receiving 5 emails per week because I only see them once. But you'll see that a lapsed customer is also going to be a one-time buyer. Well, sorry, could also be a repeat buyer or a one-time buyer. So just do bear that in mind. So based on the breakdown above, any one customer is receiving 2 to 6 emails per week, with 6 being the absolute maximum, and that's an absolute max. So yeah, that's important to know. If you're conscious of volume, you can also adjust segments so that lapsed buyers are broken down into lapsed buyers who have only purchased once, or lapsed buyers who have only purchased, who've purchased more than once. And of course, you can play around with this any way you like. This just serves as a random example, but it just shows you how you can hit all of those core pockets of your list without over emailing any one given segment. And of course, one point that I have down here is this: the really important thing about this is making sure that the email is relevant to the person on the other side. That's going to be a massive factor that's going to affect your click rates, but your unique clicks as well, which we'll talk about a bit later on in the video. So now we're on to the building your campaign decision matrix. And before scheduling a campaign, you should answer these 3 questions. What buyer state am I targeting? What is their current engagement level? And what behavior am I trying to trigger next? So from that, the campaign will actually write itself. An example logic here would be if you want to send out to highly engaged repeat buyers, maybe a campaign about product education, bundles, early access is a good fit here. Again, random example. If you want to reach out to first-time buyers with strong engagement, perhaps you want to send them more social proof, usage guidance if you're selling a supplement or skincare or something like that. And then of course, second order benefits. And then lapsed mid-value buyers, reactivation narrative before incentives. So you want to just try and get them engaged again. And then if the answer is who is this for, or at least if that is vague in your mind, the campaign should probably not be sent. There should be a clear action that wants to be, you want to be taken after every single campaign. So now you might be wondering, okay, that is all well and good, but what the hell do I actually send these people? So we'll dive into a few examples. So now we're going to go on to campaign ideas. And now that you understand the 3 layers of segmentation, we need to know what to send to each segment. And below is going to be a table of content ideas. What I'll do is I'll leave a link down below in the description with this document so you can go through it in your own time as well. But we have a bunch of different campaign ideas with primary goals attached to each. So for example, for non-buyers, we might want to send a founder story of why the product exists. The goal is to build trust, product comparison versus alternatives. Groons do this really well also, so I would definitely sign up to Groons email list and check out what they're doing. But that would be to overcome indecision. FAQ based on common pre-purchase objections. Goal here is to remove friction, so you kind of get the idea. Then for first-time buyers or first-time customers, what you'll want to send them is things like product pairing or bundle recommendation. Goal here is to increase AOV. What customers buy next and why. So if you bought a pair of jeans, you might want to send that person t-shirts just so that you can kind of cross-sell them onto other items. Reorder timing education, so you want to increase their repurchase intent. And then of course, loyalty or rewards introduction to get them into the weeds of that. Soft order reminder with no discount, encourage the habit. So you kind of get the idea again with the first-time buyers. Repeat buyers, we have a bunch here as well. Personalized recommendations based on history, customer spotlight or community feature, again, build emotional connection. You can kind of build a massive list here as to what you could send repeat buyers. But if you think about it, if we go back the list, goal with non-buyers is we want to essentially turn them into first-time buyers. The goal with first-time buyers or 1x purchasers is we want them to become a repeat purchaser. For repeat purchasers, we want them to buy another time. And then for high LTV customers, same again, we want them to buy another time. So for your LTV, your top LTV customers, perhaps you might want to invite them to a private sale, make them feel a bit exclusive, letting them in on the product roadmap. So if you're doing product development, letting them in on that, maybe even getting their insight as to like what you should release next. That's really good as well, getting feedback from your top customers or even all your customers. And of course, priority restocks and notifications, like basically giving them the royalty treatment. They're super high LTV, keep those people happy, make them feel acknowledged, and I guarantee they'll keep spending more money with your brand. Okay, so now we're on to a few examples here, and you can see just a few example designs. Again, I'm going to leave this link down below in the description so you can kind of check these out. A few of these are clients as well. You can check out the types of emails that we're sending out for these brands, but again, I won't bore you with going through those in too much detail. Grab the link down below in the description and you'll be able to check that out. Now, section number 3 is what to optimize for. So now we're on to benchmarks, and the tricky thing about benchmarks, especially in Klaviyo, is that they don't take into consideration the nuance mainly related to how your list has grown, your customer demographics, and how engaged your list is. I say this to brands all of the time, but you can take 2 similar brands in 2 similar industries. So like I'll use a skincare example again. We could take 2 skincare brands. One list could be way more engaged than the other, and there is a bit of nuance there that email marketing platforms don't really take into consideration. So do bear that in mind, because the engagement of the list depends on how that list was grown, maybe the demographics of your list as well. You could maybe have a skincare brand who's targeting people who are 50 plus, but the other skincare brand is targeting maybe more Gen Z millennials, so it might be a little bit different. So do bear that in mind. You can have 2 very similar brands and the click rates on one could be absolutely fantastic, whereas the click rates on the other could be not as fantastic, but that might be still decent for them. So there is a lot of nuance here. So as I said, through my experience working with 150 brands, definitely have noticed that every list is entirely different. What can be amazing for one brand can be terrible for another. So do bear that in mind. Email list engagement is a very contextual thing. So rather than getting too hung up on benchmarks in Klaviyo, what I would suggest you do as a brand owner is make sure that you are beating your previous metrics. I wouldn't even worry about other ones. Of course, general benchmarks are kind of okay to follow, but do bear in mind, like, your business is totally different to another business. Make sure that you're increasing your metrics against your previous month. That is probably the main important thing. Now, what I wanted to say here as well is that, you know, if your account's average click rate is 1%, your goal should be to get to 2%. If your average place order rate is 0.05, your goal should be to get it to 0.1%. Now, the above mainly applies to click rate and place order rate, and it's always worth following benchmarks for deliverability metrics, such as bounce, spam, unsubscribe, and open rates. It's still quite important. So that is still good to look at benchmarks for that. But in terms of click rate, in terms of place order rate, that can be wildly different depending on how the list is grown, and obviously a lot of other factors as well. Okay, so now we're on to assessing your performance, and there are plenty of metrics to track here, but what metrics you track is dependent on the campaign goal. So what you need to do is ask yourself, was the goal to maximize eyeballs on a particular offer? Was it to drive more people to early access? Was it to push customers to subscribe and save? Was it to convert non-buyers? The list goes on. There could be multiple goals, many different goals that you can choose from. With that being said, you'll still want to track the following. So your opens, clicks, place order rates, spam, unsubscribe, unique opens, unique clicks, and revenue. Unique opens and unique clicks I don't think is talked about enough, and we'll kind of, dive into that in a second. So I know I was talking a bit badly about benchmarks previously, but it still is worth knowing what these are for things like open, spam, unsubscribe, and bounce rate. So here they are. Of course, the benchmark for click rate is going to be like above 1%. I'm telling you right now, some brands might have a 0.5% click rate, and that could be fantastic for them, but it could be terrible for another brand. So do really pay attention to that. Don't get too hung up on click rate benchmarks. Now, most of those benchmarks should be quite achievable, but again, as I said, the two ones that you want to pay most attention to are click rate and place order rate. Why? Because they can be very, very easily to manipulate. So if you want to jack up your click rate, you can just send to a hyper engaged segment and give them maybe 20% off. Of course, that's going to get a high click rate. The exact same for place order rate. Just send your highest LTV customers a 50% discount, and boom, you have a really high place order rate. But realistically, is that going to actually make a huge difference if you're slashing your margin by 50%? So that's the point I do want to get across. Because of that metric, we do want to optimize for unique clicks and revenue, of course. So that means when we look at a monthly report, this is the metric I personally am quite interested in. Why is that the case? Because email marketing's job is to sell the click. It's not actually to get the sale. That's the website's job. What we are trying to do is we are trying to maximize the unique traffic to a website every single month. Essentially, that's kind of the goal. Of course, there's revenue goals here as well, but ultimately, that's really what email marketing does. It sends the traffic to the website. The more unique clicks we get, the more people we get to the website, the more people browsing products, the more people that are going into flows, the more people that are purchasing. So it's a knock-on effect. Click rate can depend a lot on who you're reaching out to. A non-buyer segment is going to be way different to sending out to a VIP segment. You can't compare the two, but look across the month and you should see your unique clicks increasing. So you will see this pretty easily if you're using Klaviyo. You go to business review, you go to the campaign performance summary, and you just click metrics, and then you're going to see your unique clicks here. And I love seeing this every single month, provided that revenue is going up. But this is meaning that we're sending more net new traffic to the website through email, which is obviously a win. Now, I'm definitely not saying to abandon click rate. I just want to make you very aware that it can be manipulated quite easily. It's a very contextual metric, and that unique clicks should be highly considered when evaluating campaign performance. Very, very important. So now we're on to applying this in the real world. I've already talked to you about increasing campaign volume. I've talked to you about segmentation, how you can email your list nearly every single day without annoying your customers. But I'm speaking to e-commerce brand owners day in, day out, and they simply, well, most of them don't have the operational capacity either in-house or their current agency doesn't have it to actually do this volume that is needed to essentially achieve what they need to achieve. So with that being said, if you do want a free audit from myself, I will personally do it. Click the link down below in the description. We'll set up a call and we'll put a plan in place for your brand. If not, no worries. I'll have my free 130-page email marketing guide linked down below in the description, so you can check that out. Sign up. There's absolutely fantastic resources in there. And if not, no worries at all. Please like and subscribe to this video so you can get the next one, and I'll catch you very, very soon.